Hi, I'm Nick Palmisano,
And I'm Matt Finney.
and this is the Bad News Network. America is pulling completely out of Afghanistan. No, wait. America is surging back into Afghanistan to allow the embassies and key personnel to evacuate by sending 3,000 troops. No, wait. America is going to send 8,000 troops back into Afghanistan. A lot of people are laughing about the administration jumping from "this won't be like Vietnam" to redeploying 8,000 troops over the course of only a few weeks, but there's really nothing funny about it. OEF vets are feeling it the worst. All over social media, on phone calls, and in person, I've seen many veterans wrestling with what is occurring right now. American veterans have lost friends, have been injured, and have had their entire lives changed forever because of their time in that place. But the worst is what's happening in the country. Thousands of people are being killed, including many who fought alongside America for 2 decades. Women are being re-enslaved. In one of the worst examples, a girl who was wearing a dress considered by the Taliban as too short was beaten to death. Afghanistan has known nothing but war and pain since 1976. Unlike most armchair quarterbacks, I'm not going to tell you what the right answer is, because I honestly don't know. It's a really complicated problem, and we can't be there forever, right? But I do have a few questions. Should we be nation building ever? I'm having a hard time remembering a time when we've ever done it successfully. The only argument might be Germany, but that was an anomaly. Western values, and it was in everyone's best interest to make it work, as they were part of the core of Europe. So when else were we successful? South America? We fucked that up. The Middle East? Absolutely fucked that up. Shouldn't we instead have very clear objectives and a clear end state? The first Iraq War was the only example I can think of in recent history where we did this. The objective was to push Iraq out of Kuwait. Then it was done. Total victory, minimal loss of Allied life, good for the region, yay. Everything else we've done has kind of been a shit show. If we decide to deploy and have a clear goal, how do we make the citizenry feel the pain? Because they have to. Because if they don't, wars go on unnoticed with no accountability. There's no draft to keep the sacrifice top of mind. Less than 1% of the country has served in the past 20 years, and increasingly, the country is forming a military caste system where almost everyone who is serving has had a family member serve. Should we have a mandatory tax whenever a conflict goes on for more than 3 months? Should the American people have to feel the crunch as money comes out of their own wallets so our troops aren't the only ones who sacrifice? You know, the way it used to be in World War II, in World War I. Should we build 25% into our wartime budget to handle returning troops, their injuries, their counseling, their mental health, their transition into civilian life? When I was in, they used to say our job was the men and the mission as 2 equal partners. Well, in my lifetime, I've never seen the men and women of the United States military prioritized, and I've seen the mission remain in a constant state of gray so that it can never be taken away. Should we stop prioritizing what 4-star generals say? They've told us for 2 decades that we're turning the corner in the war on terror. Did the men and women on the ground ever believe that? Should leaders only be rated by their superiors, which promotes ass-kicking and modified recommendations that tell their bosses exactly what they want to hear and leads them to providing really dumb assessments like, "We're turning the war on terror"? Or should leaders receive a 360-degree assessment, as happens in many civilian workplaces, to great success? A lot of people, Afghan and American alike, sacrifice blood, sweat, and tears, while the country sacrificed treasure and international standing. Should someone have noticed?
New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has graciously decided to step down so as not to distract the government from working tirelessly for the people. What a guy. This distraction may or may not be caused, perhaps either directly or indirectly, by the fact that he now has 11 women coming forward with allegations that he sexually harassed and groped them. I know you're as shocked as I am. I really couldn't believe it either. It's almost impossible to wrap your head around the fact that this dude basically ordered the deaths of tens of thousands of New Yorkers in nursing homes, falsified data to cover it up, lied to investigators about it, but this is what people want his head for. People, New York. Get your overly financed sports teams having, Tory-loving, toll money-grubbing, Second Amendment-hating, disgraceful candidate voting heads out of your collective asses. But I digress. Cuomo announced in a live statement that he would be resigning and would be out the door in 2 weeks. His replacement will be Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul, who will officially become New York's first female governor. The allegations against Cuomo come from 11 current and former staffers and aides, including one female state trooper. All of them have accused Cuomo of sexual harassment and repeated incidents of groping. Habitual groping, if you will. Cuomo's response to this actually had me in stitches, so I'm going to read it verbatim. He stated, "In my mind, I have never crossed the line with anyone, but I didn't realize the extent to which the line has been redrawn. This guy is off his rocker. He's been drinking the God complex Kool-Aid so long he thinks he can do no wrong." Biden said he supported Cuomo's decision to step down and called the event sad, saying he's done a hell of a job. Okay, Joe. Democratic Senator James Scofie suggested that even though Cuomo is resigning, that the state assembly should consider impeaching him anyways, which would bar him from holding offices later on. This would be entirely possible given the precedent set by impeachment hunts of former President Donald Trump. Cuomo, for his part, called this unfair and blames political bias for the reason his accusers are coming forward, rather than, being molested. He has gone as far as blaming cultural misunderstanding as the root of the debacle. Now listen, if you're Italian, you know what he's saying isn't completely untrue. Not in the sense that this isn't sexual harassment, but just in the sense that there is a stereotype of pervy old dudes. I remember growing up and watching the old timers sitting out on the sidewalk on Hanover, just catcalling every good-looking woman who passed by. They even patted or pinched a few butts and probably blew a few kisses. They go. But guy, that's not an excuse to do it. We didn't idolize those guys, you dolt. So on behalf of the Italian community, we'd like to say, put him in the bathroom!
It's been yet another bloody week in Chicago. At least 73 people were shot with a reported 10 fatalities just through last weekend. At the forefront of all this was the death of 29-year-old Ella French. In Chicago's West Englewood neighborhood last Saturday, Officer Ella French and two other officers were on patrol. They pulled over a car with expired tags being driven by 19-year-old Eric Morgan. In the passenger seat was a woman who was not being charged with a crime, and in the back seat, Eric's brother, Monty Morgan. According to the police report, Eric had at first complied with the officers to exit the vehicle and hand over the keys. Monty was non-compliant and struggled with the officers, at which point Eric took off and one of the officers gave chase. It was at this time that Monty drew a .22 caliber pistol and opened fire on Officer French and her partner, striking them both. Upon hearing the gunshots, the third partner returned and engaged Monty, striking him in the left arm and the abdomen. Eric also returned and gathered his wounded brother and fled. It is unclear to us how they got away from the third officer, but the report states that Monty was found on the ground nearby and Eric was found along with the weapon shortly thereafter. Officer Ella French died on the scene while her partner remains in critical condition in the hospital. Monty Morgan is in stable condition and is under arrest and in the hospital. This marks the 37th officer killed by gunfire this year, up 28% from last year. Mayor Lori Lightfoot arrived at the hospital only to be greeted by the backs of about 30 rank-and-file officers who turned about face when she showed up at the University of Chicago Medical Center. Alderman Matt O'Shea stated that the act of turning their backs on the mayor was indicative of how police officers across the city feel that leadership does not have their back. When asked to comment on the officers turning their backs, Mayor Lightfoot made a brief statement implying that illegal guns and gangs were the common enemy. She said, quote, "Now is not the time for divisive and toxic rhetoric or reporting. This is a time for us to come together as a city. We have a common enemy, and it is the conditions that breed the violence and the manifestations of violence, namely illegal guns and gangs." Sure, that's why the police turned their backs, because of the illegal guns. Read the room, lady. A number of vigils have been held for Officer Ella French. Fair winds, ma'am.
Last week, active duty Coastguard member 27-year-old Caroline Scholet was killed after confronting a burglar attempting to break into her car in a driveway in Jacksonville, Florida. Reports say that Scholet was holding the man at gunpoint while on the phone with police in the early hours of the morning when he drew a firearm and fired while fleeing, striking Caroline. She died shortly after of her injuries. After a week-long manhunt, 22-year-old Tyree Parker turned himself into police and is expected to be charged with second-degree murder. Caroline Scholet, a member of the Hitron Specialized Helicopter Squadron in the Coast Guard, received an honor guard escort and a motorcade as her body was brought back to be laid to rest in her hometown of Richmond, Virginia. Fair winds, man.
Imagine for a second that you have obtained the highest degree of skill in your combat sport and that you were sent to compete against the best in the world at the Olympics. Then imagine that in competition you end up winning so hard that you lose. Well, that's exactly what happened to Saudi Arabia's Tarek Hamidi in the 75-kilogram Kumite finals in this year's Olympic Games in Tokyo. Tarek Hamidi faced off against Iran's Shahad Ganzadeha. This is a hard name. I'm just going to go with it. In a karate final, the likes of which would make Danielson jealous. Here's how it all went down. As the match began, both competitors bounced lightly in front of each other like a couple of Kai Cobras ready to strike. Shahad threw a right roundhouse kick and whipped like a toddler at a t-ball game. As he moved to attack again, the lightning reflexes of Tarek Hamidi snapped with such speed that he ripped a hole in the fabric of time and space and teleported his foot from the ground to the point of Sahed's chin before Sahed could even whisper, "Mate." He felt Shahad like Daniel Boone on a noticeably chubby redwood. It was an expert counter left kick with zero telegraphing, perfect timing, and surgical precision. It was the kind of kick that occurs only after years of dedication and tens of thousands of hours of devout repetition. It is the pinnacle display of a combatant's sacrifice to martial arts. And for this, Tarek was disqualified and the unconscious Shahad was awarded the prestigious Olympic gold medal for being folded like a lawn chair. He stood in a daze atop the Olympic pedestal, clutching his gold medal and wondering where the he was at the moment. Tarek Hamidi stood abreast of him with a silver medal adorned and left foot glistening in fresh Shahad chin juice. We at BNN salute you, Tarek Hamidi. We know you're gonna be okay. Yeah, it's a party in the karate.
Dubbing themselves the Big Bird Bandits, two thieves stole a $160,000 costume of the famed Sesame Street Big Bird character from the wardrobe at a circus show in Australia. It seems that not long after the heist, their conscience took over and they returned the costume with a note in the beak. In part, the note read, "We had no idea what we were doing or what our actions would cause. We were just having a rough time and we were trying to cheer ourselves up. We had a great time with Mr. Bird. He's a great guy, and no harm came to our friend." The note ended with, "Sorry to be such a big burden." Police arrested the two suspects in connection to the incident, Tasman and Cody, who were charged with theft and unlawfully being on the premises. Last week, a third and previously unknown suspect, who remained unnamed in a press release, was arrested after she was captured on CCTV footage during the theft. All three suspects are scheduled to appear in court after the year. They could face up to 1, 2, 3 counts, 4, 5 counts of theft. Dein Papieren, bitte! France has enacted the Virus Pass, where consumers and event attendees have to show a QR code for entry and service. This code proves that either the holder has had the vaccine, recently recovered from the virus, or has had a negative COVID test. According to reports, those who don't comply can be fined up to $160. That's in French. Support for this is a mixed bag, as some of the French public is in favor, while others are opposed. The opposition has been marching in the thousands against this measure for the past 4 weeks. This kind of implementation has been a hot topic for other countries as well, including here in the US. So far, there's no indication that the French plan to rescind or increase the requirements for the Virus Pass. Since this is a French story, I'll report it in French for our native-speaking French viewers, Canadian French variant-speaking viewers, and sacrilegious Louisiana Creole French viewers. Bon vivant Billebas, cul-de-sac, les cerveilles, chicken cordon bleu. Formidable bâton rouge, noblesse, libresse, au bon pain, château marmont. Croquet monsieur, croquet madame. Non es frites frette, Jacques Grépopin, Marquis de Sade, Tourette Whoop. French toaster croissant, les misérables. Luc Rebondot, D'Artagnan Perrier, Frank Tanton. Peanut butter, Profet. Et du toilette. Ratatouille, Macron, Normandie, deux confettes, choupe des jours Bastille. Louvre Notre-Dame, Eiffel, Joan of Arc, Voltaire, Antoinette. À petit déjeuner entre vous. Je suis surrender, s'il vous plaît, sacre bleu en ton Émilie. Les incompétents, mon après pamplemousse. Avec mes water slide.
And finally, in Florida Man news, have you ever gotten into a theoretical argument with a buddy about who would win in a fight? The guy with the gun or the guy with the knife? Well, don't you worry about it, because 2 Florida men did us a favor and played out the scenario just so the rest of us don't end up dead over the argument. Eric Hansen was wielding an imaginary knife, but Neil Gallagher was armed with a loaded handgun. When Eric set out to prove his point with the imaginary knife, Neil shot Eric in the face with a very real bullet. Neil called the paramedics, but it was too late for his buddy Eric because he had just shot him in the face. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Investigators don't believe Gallagher was trying to kill him, But that does not mean that no crime was committed. Prosecutors say his actions show a reckless disregard for human life that constitutes manslaughter. This roughly translated in my head to, "You're too stupid for this stuff. We are taking it all away." Well, Neil, it looks like you will have plenty of time to theoretically determine what other ways you could have proven your point in a jail cell. Have a think about that. I just want to say once again that he shot him in the face. And folks, I hope this teaches you all a lesson. Don't bring a theoretical knife to a real gunfight. And with that, I'm Nick Palmisano.
And I'm Matt Finney.
And this is the Bad News Network. Our news is at least as bad as the news you're getting already, and I worked out with Tim Kennedy 2 days ago, and my stomach is still very sore. As always, you can get 25% off on rangerup.com using the code BNN, and check out Nick and Matt on OnlyFans for really middling content. Have a good weekend.